Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of nightlife,
Ooh, interesting.
but with a bit of a twist.
Okay.
We're going beyond the surface, beyond just the lights and music, to really try to understand the dreams and the hopes of the women working in these spaces, the ones we don't always see or hear about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's important to remember that, even though these women work in a setting that some might consider unconventional, they often have the same desires as anyone else.
Exactly.
They want love, family, security, all those things that make us feel grounded.
Right, like that universal yearning for a good life,
Right.
a fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
And that's actually where our sources for this deep dive get really interesting.
Okay, I'm curious.
They introduce us to this character, Bella. She's not a real person, but she's based on so many real stories of women in the industry. And Bella, she's been working in nightlife for like a decade. But she's got this internal pull
Oh, wow.
towards something different, something more.
Interesting.
So it makes you think, how common is Bella's story? What keeps women in this line of work, even when they're dreaming of something else?
That's a great question. And honestly, Bella's experience is far from unique.
Right.
There's actually a term for it, red light blues.
Red light blues.
Yeah. It describes this feeling of being stuck, wanting to break free from the industry, but running into barriers everywhere. And one of the biggest barriers is, well, societal stigma.
Right, of course. But is it, really that significant?
Absolutely. There's a 2023 study from the Journal of Sex Research that found women who have worked in the sex industry are often seen as less trustworthy, less competent, even less deserving of basic rights compared to, others.
Wow, that's pretty harsh.
Yeah. And that stigma makes it incredibly difficult for them to find housing, to get a job, even just to build healthy relationships outside of that world.
It's almost like society is punishing them for something that, in many cases, they might feel forced into in the first place.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue.
And our sources also pointed to another major factor, financial dependence.
Right. The income from nightlife can be hard to walk away from, especially when there's not a lot of options.
Makes sense.
A lot of these women are the main breadwinners for their families, or they're trying to escape, difficult situations.
Right, of course.
It's a tough spot to be in because even if the work brings in money, it doesn't really guarantee that long-term security.
It's almost like a double-edged sword. The very thing that's supporting them is also kind of keeping them tied to a life they might be desperate to leave.
Exactly. It's this constant push and pull, and then you layer on the emotional toll of living a double life.
Oh, right.
Our sources talk about women who are hiding their profession from loved ones, living with this constant fear of being found out. It must be exhausting.
It sounds incredibly stressful. I mean, what kind of impact does that have on their relationships and their own sense of self?
I mean, just imagine, right? Constantly having to keep this huge part of your life secret. It leads to isolation, prevents real, genuine connections. And then it can manifest as shame, guilt, even a skewed sense of self-worth.
Wow.
There's this tension between who they are in the nightlife world and who they want to be outside of it.
It's almost like they're forced to be different people depending on where they are, who they're with.
Right, exactly. They can never really fully be themselves. It really does make you think about the emotional weight of that double life.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. I mean, imagine carrying around this secret, this part of yourself that you can't even share with the people closest to you.
Exactly. It's like this constant looking over your shoulder feeling.
Right, like you can never really relax.
And in our sources, they talk about this feeling of never being able to fully relax. You're always having to censor yourself, always worried about who might find out.
It's got to be exhausting living like that.
Absolutely. And that fear can really seep into their personal relationships.
Oh, I bet.
One woman we read about, she described it as like she was always wearing a mask,
Yeah.
never able to show her true self to her family. Heartbreaking.
It really is. And it makes you think about the internal conflict these women must be facing. Right?
Oh, for sure.
On one hand, they're navigating this world, this demanding and often dangerous world.
Right.
But then on the other hand, they have all these hopes and dreams that might seem completely at odds with their reality.
Totally. And that's something we don't always acknowledge.
Yeah.
Society tends to box people in this industry into very narrow and often dehumanizing stereotypes.
Yeah.
And we forget that these are complex individuals with a whole range of aspirations. I mean, they might dream of becoming a chef, a teacher, a writer, things that have nothing to do with the work they're doing now.
Right. And trying to reconcile those dreams with the judgment they face. It's got to be so difficult.
Absolutely. And there's this fear, this very real fear, that their past will define them forever, that they won't be able to escape the label.
Right, like they're trapped in this vicious cycle.
Exactly. They're judged for the work they do,
Uh-huh.
but then they also face judgment if they want to leave that work behind.
Right, like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It's a system that feels, I don't know, almost rigged against them.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the economic realities here.
Right.
I mean, we talked about financial dependence earlier, but for some women, this work, it provides them with a sense of agency and control that they haven't found in other areas of their lives.
You know, that's a really important point to bring up.
Yeah.
For some women, sex work actually offers a level of financial independence that they may not have experienced before.
Right.
It allows them to take care of themselves, their families, to escape poverty, or even to gain control in a world that often feels very chaotic.
So it's like a survival mechanism,
In a way.
like a way to make the best of a tough situation.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that a woman can feel empowered by the work, but still long for a different future. You know,
Right.
It's not one or the other. These experiences can coexist.
Right, that makes sense. It's not always so black and white.
Exactly.
There's so much nuance to this.
There's a whole spectrum of experiences within the sex industry, and I think it's so important to acknowledge that complexity.
Yeah.